Our landfills are filling up. People are against new sites for landfills. Another solution to our trash in the United States is exporting it, getting rid of it. The developed world tends to send trash to the developing world. The developing world has no money, so it takes little payment for us to dump our trash in their countries. Most developed countries agreed to stop sending toxic and hazardous waste, but we still send regular trash. And we call this imperialism. Alright, this is where wealthy countries, to get rid of their waste, they send it off to poor countries. Alright, you might say that it creates jobs. You might say that there's positives to this situation in other countries, but in reality, here's a guy pulling green boards off of computers, and he gets money. That's true. He gets money for the minerals and the metals that he gets from these green boards, particularly gold off of a green board. But there are no environmental controls on this process. Computers have valuable metals and minerals, but they're also toxic. To get the metals, they have to burn away the plastic. When plastic is burned, it gives off toxic chemicals. There's lead. That lead goes into the atmosphere. It goes into the water. Many die due to toxic poisoning. Here's a picture of people taking apart the components of some electronics. Alright, they have to burn the plastics off to get the copper and the minerals that they want that are valuable. And in doing so, it becomes a very, very toxic process. It pollutes the land, the air, and the water in these developing countries. Right, here's an individual standing on not rocks in a pond, but he's actually standing on computer monitors. Trash is exported to other countries who cannot deal with it. This is not a place to grow up in. These places are very poor, very, very environmentally destroyed. Very, very bad situation. So we need to prevent this from happening as much as possible. There's laws that are beginning to be passed. In Pennsylvania, we have the Covered Device Recycling Act, which went into effect January 1st of 2012. Each state manages and regulates their e-waste differently. In our state, we have the Covered Device Recycling Act. All right, and this puts the responsibility on the side of the manufacturers. The manufacturers like Dell and Apple, manufacturers of electronics, they must advertise to the public and hold recycling events. All right, we have now banned, what this law did was it banned the disposal of e-waste into landfills. It is now illegal to throw a remote control into your trash or a television. So you'll drive down the roads and you'll see people who have televisions out for the trash, but the garbage man will not take them. And those electronics will sit at the end of the driveways until the people figure out that the garbage man won't take it. All right, so it now puts the onus on manufacturers to hold these events so that these things can be recycled properly and not exported to other countries. Okay, so that's how Pennsylvania does it with the PA Covered Device Recycling Act. Here's a recycling day held by a manufacturer. As you can see, there's a lot that's brought in. All right, we get all this kind of stuff. This was one that was held by Save. We filled 8 tractor trailers full in one day. It was actually about 5 hours. Lots of computer monitors, lots of cables and cords. It's fascinating to see what comes up at these recycling days. But there's so much e-waste out there, and even more being generated every day. Here's just a quick little FYI. These are the states in the United States that have their own legislation, Pennsylvania being one of them. The blue states are the ones that currently either working on legislation or do not have them yet. What's interesting is that with waste, we've polluted our water, we've polluted our air, we're now polluting our land with sanitary landfills, we're exporting it to other countries, we're even polluting space. Right? This picture shows you what's called space junk. And if you'd notice, there's a lot of space junk orbiting our planet, very close to our planet. And when I taught astronomy, I would teach this, the little white dots near Earth, we teach that as being called low Earth orbit. Alright, and you see this ring. Yes, Earth has a ring, just like Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Earth has its own ring. Ours happens to be artificial in the form of space junk. All right, we call this high Earth orbit. Anytime there's a rocket launch or a defunct satellite or in space there's work being done and a bolt falls off, all those pieces of junk become space junk, and they orbit our planet at thousands of miles per hour, but they're all still up there. So we have this artificial ring around our planet and this artificial layer of space junk very close to Earth orbit. It might look like you can never launch a rocket and get into space without ripping a hole in the side by a bolt traveling at 24,000 miles an hour. The space junk is a huge, huge problem. However, NASA has figured out and knows where each piece of space junk is. They track each individual piece. And in this image, it looks like it would be impossible to launch. However, space is very big, even very close to the Earth. Space is big, so there are windows, and because NASA knows where each piece is, they launch without incident. However, there are stories of how the International Space Station has been in danger of a piece of space junk. So that's a discussion for class. Bring your questions. That's a good one. The last part of this lecture is how to treat our waste. So according to the EPA, we should reduce, reuse, and recycle. The next best thing would be to treat, which we're going to talk about now in the incineration process, or what's called energy recovery. We're going to call these things waste-to-energy facilities or waste-to-energy plants. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to burn waste. We're going to incinerate waste. We're going to run water through the system, and we're going to turn that water into steam through the heat generated from the incineration process. We're going to hook that up to a generator, which generates electricity. All right, and that's how we treat our waste. Here is a waste-to-energy plant, and this one you might recognize. This is the one that's at the bottom of the turnpike across the street from IKEA in Plymouth Meeting. At this facility, waste is treated. The purpose is to burn and reduce the volume of trash, and that happens by as much as about 80%. So what we're doing is we're only putting 20% into a landfill. We're putting the ash and everything that got incinerated into the landfill. We don't get rid of the need for landfills. In this case, we're treating the waste, and by treating it, we're reducing the volume. We still need landfills, but we can now make landfills last a lot longer. So disposal, if you remember, is the worst option. The next best option would be to treat it, to reduce the volume, and that could be done by as much as 80%. And then when we burn it, we get heat. We can turn water to steam, and we can generate electricity to steam in this waste-to-energy plant. Okay, how does it work? I have two pictures here, and this is the first picture. All right, here you go with the second one. You can flip back and forth if you like when you pause this to look at it a little bit more detail. I'm going to use this picture. I just like it a little bit better. All right, so here's how this works. The trash trucks come in. All right, and the trash trucks come into what's called the tipping floor. All right, and they literally tip their backs and dump the trash into a giant pit. All right, in this giant pit here, these things are huge. It can be as deep as 3 stories deep. All right, and then you have this giant crane that will come over and literally mix up the trash. So what you want to do is mix it up as much as possible. And this crane here is going to do that. It becomes more evenly burned if you do that, and it's because trash trucks are all different. This trash truck might have gotten its materials from a site that had wet materials, whereas the next trash truck comes in and dumps from a construction site with all dry stuff. So if the crane comes in and mixes all this material, it's mixing the wet with the dry and getting it more even and compacted, and then when it burns, it's going to burn a little bit more even. All right, so that's the process there. The crane will take this waste and put it onto a conveyor belt, where it literally just funnels down this conveyor belt, which puts it into a furnace and burns it. So in the furnace is where the incineration process happens. This gives off a tremendous amount of heat. All right, and what we can do is, you see the boiler system here, we can pull water through these pipes, and that water from the heat from the incineration process is going to turn to steam. That steam comes out, is hooked up to a turbine, which spins, which is hooked up to a generator, which spins, which generates electricity, which goes out onto the grid. All right, so we can generate a lot of electricity from this process, which is the nice part. A waste-to-energy plant is good for this reason. All right, but some material doesn't burn. All right, we do have waste, and here's a little bit about the waste. That ash that comes out, once the waste is burned, will come onto a conveyor belt and move through here. And if you notice, it's going to get put onto a truck, and that truck goes away. It gets dumped into a landfill. All right, we call this bottom ash. So far we've taken a lot of waste, burned it, and we've reduced the volume tremendously. In this conveyor belt, you can have magnets in here that takes out the metals, and you can send those off to be recycled. But the ash that remains solid needs to be taken away and disposed of in a landfill. All right. There's another type of waste that comes out of this process. The solid stuff we're going to call bottom ash. There's a bit of another type of ash, and it's going to come out here from the incineration process, and it's going to move through two types of systems that are going to help clean it. And this other type of waste is called fly ash. All right, fly ash is the exhaust or the air pollution that comes out of the incineration process. This stuff, this fly ash, is extremely toxic. All right, because we're burning plastics, we're burning rubber, we're literally burning chemicals. If you look through the little window of the furnace, you'll see little explosions going off because people throw away canisters with who knows what inside of them and chemicals. And when those gases are released, it's tremendously toxic, and we call that fly ash. And what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to take that fly ash. We can't keep it on site, but what we're going to do is we're going to treat it, and then we're going to release it. So the treatment process of the fly ash is going to go through two things. The first one is called a scrubber. All right, and that scrubber is literally going to clean a little bit of that fly ash, get some of those pollutants out of there, and it puts it into a solid particulate, and it dumps it down here into the bottom ash, and it goes away to the landfill. All right. However, some of that exhaust and that smoke continues to go through, and the second type of the second cleansing process is called an electrostatic precipitator. They call it a filter in this picture. We'll get a little bit into the electrostatic precipitator in class, but just know for right now that it does a second little bit of cleaning, and then that exhaust that was once very, very, very toxic goes into our smokestack and out into the environment. The cleaning process through scrubbers and electrostatic precipitators are about 90% effective. That's good. But what that means is 10% of very, very toxic exhaust is being released into the environment. So that's a little bit about an incinerator or a waste-to-energy plant. We can't get rid of all the toxins. That fly ash becomes a serious problem with incinerators. However, what we're doing is we're treating our waste, we're reducing it by about 80%, which that now 20% can go into a landfill. All right, so let's take a look at a couple of pictures here. Here's the control room. You can see these are very sophisticated plants. All right, it takes a certain type of job and engineering know-how. All right, here's trucks coming into the tipping floor and literally dumping the trash. You can see the crane right here in the trash, mixing it up. Okay, it'll now pick it up, put it into the conveyor belt. Here's another picture of the crane coming in. I like this picture too because you can see how deep this storage pit is. Here's a map, and I couldn't find any information to verify this. However, it shows the states that have decided to utilize waste-to-energy plants as a solution to their waste problem. If you notice here, Pennsylvania, among Maine, Minnesota, and a couple of New England states, has decided that we're going to be a waste-to-energy plant state. All right, so it's one of the ways that we treat waste in our state. All right, in the top left, you have bottom ash. All right, and this is the stuff that's going to go off into a landfill. The fly ash is on the bottom right picture. Fly ash. A bit of that is collected after the scrubbers filter that exhaust. But this stuff is extremely toxic, all right, which makes it a concern to put it into landfills. So what we actually do with it is we put it into concrete blocks. All right, yes, fly ash is put into concrete blocks. So instead of disposing it, we put it into our building materials. All right, here you go, concrete blocks. So there's the very famous catchy phrase, the solution to pollution is dilution. And in the case of fly ash, we get it out into society through our building materials. So it's actually not that bad of a thing to do. You might be making a face. However, as long as you don't eat this material, you should be very safe by having it used out in society. Incinerators cause a lot of concern. People will come out and protest. Nobody wants them. Alright, you'll see a lot of opposition to this way of treating waste. It's not easy to get rid of waste in this way because nobody wants to live near one. Which brings me back to the incinerator down in Plymouth meeting. This one was actually being planned to put in Souderton, and the residents of Souderton were able to politically get it rejected, and this one then ended up down in Plymouth meeting. So you almost had a waste-to-energy plant in your community, and you can think about if you would have voted yes or no to that decision. Nevertheless, it is how we treat waste. Not a very popular one. We need to look at other options, but that's for another lecture. In this one, I hope that you learned a little bit about landfills and how we dispose of our waste, and a little bit about waste-to-energy plants and how we treat our waste. Until next time, this is Mr. Burley signing off.